Hi, my name is James Lowe, and the paper I've written is entitled Are STEM Schools the Future of America's Schooling? So what is a STEM or a STEAM school, and why is this an important topic to me? First of all, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. A STEAM school just adds one more letter and includes arts. So the reason why I picked this topic, why it's so important to me, is I teach at an elementary school, work at an elementary school that is working towards becoming a STEAM school. And right now, STEAM and STEM seems to be a buzzword in education, and a lot of people are just jumping on the bandwagon and just jumping into these projects and activities. And I wanted to make sure that it really is worth the investment. There's a lot of money that can be pushed into this program, and I just want to make sure that that's really what our school should be investing in. So as I read through all the different articles, each article highlighted different schools. One of the schools that really stood out to me is Richfield STEM School in Minnesota. And the reason they stood out to me is because they kind of summarized what a lot of the other schools were doing, at least the good STEM schools. And these are the three areas that it really focuses. They say that a STEM school should focus on. So first is collaboration, second is logic and critical thinking, and finally innovation. So a STEM school obviously requires a lot of collaboration because students are doing hands-on projects, they're doing engineering projects, a lot of science and technology, and they need to learn to work with others. They need to be able to delegate and not always be in charge, and they need to accept responsibility, especially those who tend to stand back. They have to be logical and critical thinkers, and students need to plan, test, and rethink choices. One of the big things I liked in many of the articles is they pointed out that there shouldn't always be only one solution for a project. It should be open-ended where students could create something that no one ever thought of. And if every project we give them has only one solution and one answer, then we're doing it wrong. And then innovation. A lot of the articles brought up that we don't know the jobs that our children will have in the future, our students will have in the future, especially in the elementary level. If students are taught to be creative, then they can create the jobs of the future and not just fill an existing position that's already there. So STEM is more than just an engineering degree program. One of the biggest critiques, and I made sure to find a few articles that actually fought against the idea of pushing STEM schools in America, and one of their biggest complaints is STEM schools tend, especially universities, tend to push towards one specific area, and the students graduate with a very specific science degree or a very specific engineering degree, and those degrees aren't necessarily needed in their fields, at least not as much as the graduates are coming out. And a lot of them end up going into business. Now they're successful in business because of the logical thinking and the skills that they've developed, but the degree itself wasn't what made them qualified. And so with STEM schools, we have to be really careful that we focus on what's important. And that's what this next quote says, is STEAM is a philosophy of education and not a program. I really liked that because if we're teaching the students to collaborate and think logically and to do all those things that were mentioned on the last slide, then the students will really be prepared for any career and not just a science or an engineering degree. Big business does not always equal good for schools. A good example is, for example, Sarah E. Good STEM Academy has worked together with IBM, and one of the things that IBM has promised is that anyone who graduates from that school is guaranteed a job with IBM, and they'll start out making $40,000 or more. So that's an incentive for especially communities that maybe have a low graduation rate or students who feel like they're never going to have a real job. That gives them the motivation they need. The problem with big business is because a lot of times they want to be involved in the curriculum and because they're giving so much money, a lot of times students who graduate from those schools really only have one specific skill, and it's a skill that big business wants. And so it doesn't always prepare kids for any type of job. It kind of sucks them into one area. Another issue with STEM is, especially schools that don't do STEM correctly, is that they end up just doing projects. And so I liked this quote. It said, technology should be considered a resource and not a subject. And we should be teaching students to use technology to solve problems and not just putting them on iPad apps or software that they just sit down and they do a project or they answer questions. I also like this quote. Children actively engaged in the arts are likely to have higher test scores than those with little to no involvement, which is part of the reason why Coral Canyon Elementary decided to make it a STEAM school instead of just a STEM school. We felt that the arts were crucial because of the critical thinking, the discovery, the creativity that comes from doing those art projects. Educators must change everything. Another problem that a lot of STEM schools fall into is they do all these projects, they do all these activities, and then in the end they still give the same test and they grade it the same way. And so what a lot of the articles suggested is that students need to create portfolios, and they're graded on those portfolios based on the time they put in, their creativity, and not just given a test. We can't teach them one way and then test them a different way. So teachers need training and not scripted programs. Another problem that many STEM schools fall into is just buying a program with lots of activities built in. They start from the beginning of the book, they go through into the projects, and then they finish. What really needs to happen is teachers need to be trained, and they need to learn how to create their own activities and to understand how to work with the kids that they have, and not just give an activity that the book tells them to. So at my school, at Coral Canyon Elementary, the way we have started out is each month we have a STEM day or a STEAM day, and we complete a project. And so here's a few of the projects that we have done. The middle one, the paper airplane launch. The students built their own paper airplane. They watched a YouTube video on aerodynamics and how planes fly, and then they created their own paper airplane, and then they went out in the hall and they actually flew the airplane. And those that went the farthest got to come up to the front and show the students, the rest of the class, what they did and how their design was created. Then the students were given a second chance to create another airplane, either to modify their first one or to create a whole new one. And so they were able to learn from either what they did right and make it better, or learn from their mistakes and how to go a different direction. So a lot of critical thinking that was done in that project. So what does all this really mean? How does it really affect me as a teacher? This quote kind of summed up everything that I read. It said, STEM schools aren't necessarily on a mission to create a generation of NASA scientists or top engineers, just curious problem solvers who can make an impact on the world. And that's what really matters, is teaching these students to be creative, to think logically, to work together, and to communicate. And if that's what our focus is as a STEM or STEAM school, then we're on the right path. And even the critics agreed that those are the things that students need, and not necessarily just a degree. So they can take those skills into any job in the future. Here are the references for a few of the articles that I read. These are the ones that were found in this presentation. If you'd like to see a full list of the references that I used, they are found in my paper. Thank you very much.